And the second question is, how or where do I find multiples or valuation tactics for niche businesses? So we are quite interested in all businesses around properties. Can be like 3 target groups we have on our plate. The first one is everybody who's rocking up on site and doing something physically. So can be contractors, can be subcontractors, can be everybody who has like hard assets, that sort of thing. And target group number 2 is everybody around services. So can be surveying companies, can be asbestos engineers or dam-proof engineers or whatever. And third one is everybody around supply chain. So it can be windows, doors manufacturer, can be kitchen manufacturer. So everybody you need to get a property fully kitted out. So that's what we're interested in. But where do we actually find those multipliers for different sizes? So there are different jumps and multipliers in different price ranges, turnover and EBITDA ranges, and yeah.
Yeah, and so I would say, Deal Stats is one place that you can get that. I don't know, are most of the businesses that you're working with also in the UK, or are you dealing with businesses in the US or around in other parts of the world as well?
At the moment in the UK, but we have a few good people in the US, and so we would like to get into the US market ASAP.
Yeah, so there's Biz Comps, which has some data. There's Deal Stats, Peer Comps. The problem you're going to have in IBIS world when you get into bigger things, the problem you're going to have is that when somebody sells a piece of real estate, there is always a transfer tax or something, and there's a title document that has to be recorded. And so you can always find data on how much a property sold for. But when you're dealing with business is just personal property. Privately held companies don't have any reporting requirements like that. Federal tax returns are not public information. And so when a privately held business is sold, there's no requirement for that information to be reported anywhere as to what the price was or what any of the deal points were. So when you go to Deal Stats and Peer Comps and Biz Comps, you're getting a very small selection of data, because the only people who put information into those databases are business brokers or business appraisers, or sometimes some of the SBA lenders, will put information in there. But if you're dealing with specific niche businesses, it can be hard. A lot of times you can look for, I think Value Source is another one, but you can look up an SIC code and it's going to give you, let's say there's a dozen businesses in there with that SIC code, but as you're looking at the descriptions of them, they're not that niche, right? Like you're talking about construction trades. So your construction trades, if you have a plumbing company, an HVAC company, a windows manufacturer, all of those might, your windows manufacturer will definitely have a different SIC code, but some of your trades might be grouped in just having a construction SIC code. So they might all be coming up, but if you're looking specifically only for HVAC companies or for plumbing or something like that, you're going to have to narrow that down, and you might end up only having 2 or 3. And those 2 or 3 may have sold, one may have sold in 2007, one may have sold in 2016, and then the other one sold in 2021. So the data is not always available for what you're looking for. I mean, it is just the fact of the matter. So there are multiple databases. You can use multiple databases to try and garner that information. Also, when you use Business Reference Guide Online, because are you a member of IBBA, Seb?
No, not yet.
Okay. I would recommend it. It is an international business broker association. We do have a lot of people from Canada. Most of the members are US based, but we do have a lot of people from Canada. We've got people from Singapore, from the UK, and so forth. So it's a good organization. One of the membership benefits is access to the business reference guide. Business reference guide will give you some rules of thumb. It'll give you some questions to ask. Again, data is limited. It's not going to give you specific deals per se, as far as sales price and SDE or EBITDA, any of that, but it will give you general information on rules of thumb. And sometimes it will, excuse me, also pull in information from deal stats.
Yeah, so I give you an example. We are looking at timber merchant. So, and this timber merchant, I thought, okay, well, they have like what, 150K EBITDA. So they must have somewhere around multiplier between 3.5 or whatever. But I did a little bit of research online and I found a multiplier of 6.18. And I was like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, so it's quite hard. So what do we do then if we can't find the information? Is it kind of sticking the finger in the air and look what we can get out of the deal, or what is it?
You know, I think that you have to look at what deals are actually going for in the size market that you're working in. And so if you take all, I remember being in a conference a couple of years ago, and they were saying if you take all of the records that are in like Biz Comps and all of the businesses that have sold over the last, I don't know how many years that Biz Comps has been around, but let's say 20 years. So if you take all of that data and analyze it, the median sales price is going to be a 2.3 multiple.
Yeah.
It's just the median. And so when you're dealing, I can tell you just from experience, when you're dealing with 150,000 and in adjusted EBITDA. Now, are you talking EBITDA? Or are you talking sellers' discretionary earnings?
No, talking EBITDA.
EBITDA. So they have a manager. You're not including the owner's compensation in that number,
No.
right?
No.
So, yeah. So your EBITDA is going to be a little bit higher. I mean, in terms of what does the owner pay themselves typically? Do you know?
Not yet. We are waiting for the proper numbers actually. So we only have the top line numbers at the moment. But I think by the mid of next week, we should have them.
Okay. All right. So, I'm not an expert in the UK, in multiples in the UK, but I can tell you in the US, and I think it's probably pretty close to the same, to be honest with you. But if you have 150K in EBITDA, and let's say the owner is paying themselves 100 grand. So that seller's discretionary earnings then would be 250. And on SDE of 250, you're probably going to get somewhere between a 2.5 and a 3 multiple.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
A 6.18 multiple, if they're doing 10 million in revenue and their EBITDA would need to be probably over $1 million to get a 6 multiple.
Yeah.
For most businesses.
I thought so, yeah.
So yeah, so the multiples in middle market and lower middle market and middle market businesses are going to be very, very different than the multiples for small businesses. And it's just one of those things. If your EBITDA is under $1 million, you're going to be hard pressed to get upwards of a 4. You might be able to get let's say you had EBITDA of, well, I'll convert it back to SDE. But if you had SDE of 800,000, you probably could get a 4 on that, maybe up to 4.5, maybe, depending on the business. If it had a lot of recurring revenue, you might be able to get higher. Meaning like a security company that's got a security monitoring company or something like that, where it's just monthly revenue and there's really not a lot of activity. I mean, so those tend to sell for premium.